taking this opportunity, to come with a serious issue that we need to talk about, to come with a serious conversation, where we all have to come together and air our views, So for those who are also viewing our YouTube channel, Zawadi Fire Red, twasema siku njema kwenu nyinyi nyote popote mliko kwenye pande zote za dunia. Twatumai siku yenu inaendelea vizuri. Huku kwenye Mzansi FM kila kitu kiko shwari tu, tunawaka moto. Siku inaendelea vizuri na tuko shwari tu. Twatumai kila mtu yuko poa popote mliko. So today we just gonna be talking about something very sensitive, something very important, because it is us that need to create, our reality, and it is our responsibility to create the reality that we will really love to live in, love to see, happening around us and also within us. Remember, life is a product, of decisions and choices. Previously, if you are checking my YouTube channel, so we were talking about the idea of decision making, so it was a build on, it was part 2 of what we did on the previous presentation, where we're talking about the idea of decision taking, and choice making, how these things affect our lives and how these things, create our reality and define our lives, in the short and long run, So we also tabled ways of, how to make decisions. We were just giving you tools, as an individual, and also any grouping of people, any association also, be it in business, be it in terms of institutions of faith or belief or religion, be it institution of cultural, expressions. We were giving you tools as to how to come about with, making decisions and choices also. This is what we were talking about. So yeah, today we just played you a clip. Those who are listening, who are tuning in to Mzansi FM right now, we just played a clip, by Professor Lumumba, where he's talking about thematically, he was saying Africa won't rise by prayer and fasting. That was his theme. So yeah, man. I'm sure there is maybe it's the same part where he was talking about Africa in the dinner table. Where Africa is this big cake. And foreign countries or foreign groups, organized groups of people are slicing Africa amongst themselves. And we Africans remain poor. So now it's a matter of leadership. There is nobody that can come into any continent. There is nobody that can come into any country, and take away everything and just, benefit themselves just like that without having to cooperate, or the cooperation, of anyone who's, in leadership within that geographic space, So this is what is happening, in Africa. Foreign so-called investors, they come here, they just do as they like. And in many African countries, there is not much of regulation, no strict regulation. If ever there's any demo regulation, it's not even fair, especially unto the citizens, of the continent. It's not fair because now we see Africans, we are very poor by and large. Maybe we are the poorest amongst them all, but when we look at it, Africa is the richest, of all this earth, all this world. Africa is the richest. All the raw materials that these organized groups of people who have flags of certain countries, they come here in the name of investment, to take away the things they need, the raw materials they need to build their businesses, to build themselves up there, to muscle up themselves up there. Africa has always been in this point of compromise. We African people, we have always find ourselves in a point of, this survival mode, condition, state, or position, where we're just struggling to survive each and every day of our lives. Ever since this idea of colonization happened, we Africans found ourselves, in this survival mode. Firstly, we were never given a chance. We were never allowed, we were never let free, to come together and define who we are, define our interest, and define how do we solve the problems, the challenges that we are facing as a continent, as a nation, because wherever African people are, there is so much sorrow, misery, poverty, disease, all this negativity that's happening out there are so much within, and amongst African communities, then you'll ask yourself many questions, especially here in Africa, now that, we are home. We are not like our brothers and sisters, we who were raided and trafficked, during the ages of mass human trafficking. They call it slave trade. I don't believe it. That term is a lie. It was never about trade. It was, the human trafficking. So we can talk about them. They did not choose to find themselves in Europe, in America. But always remember, African people were the indigenous and natives of Europe long way back then, before the arrival of the Caucasian race. We are the natives in America, in Australia, India, Asia, everywhere. So yeah, man, as we continue with the conversation, we are talking now about Africans here in the continent of Africa. How come so much poverty? How come so much sorrow? All you are seeing is mass migration now. We are always migrating now. It's survival mode. Poverty is driving people, to leave their homes, and go and seek, survival elsewhere. And that thing is destroying families, it's destroying countries, it's destroying the entire African nation. It creates a condition where there is no order. There is no harmony. There is no sense. Because even amongst ourselves, so much violence is happening right now. All negativity has come into our space. Remember, an empty stomach, can be very dangerous to the mind and the heart of a human being. Because now the stomach cannot be promised tomorrow. The stomach needs to eat, and it needs to eat now. What does the stomach complain? Because the body needs energy. You as the infinite consciousness within this bio assembly, you need energy to continue, being alive, active and well and healthy also. So it's based on food. So if you can't find food, you can't find good healthcare services, you can't find, means, of making an income, so much that you can sustain yourself, you can sustain, and provide for your family, you can build your community, we can build our countries, we can build the continent, and we can build ourselves wherever we may be. Is a serious issue. That is why we will find people doing all these negative things that we find people doing. So the push factor is poverty. The push factor is, the conditions of life, the unbearable conditions of life in a space whereby we see some people, like us, they are living large. I wonder if anyone ever read this book called The Oligarch. If you ever read that book, you'll understand what's happening in Africa. That book, it was compiled by a certain journalist where they were investigating, the issues, like it's something like state capture. It's something like that, how certain groups of people, in Africa are looting and raiding, profiteering and racketeering, in Africa, looting the resources, the natural resources, making themselves rich at the expense of the citizens. They don't care. They just don't care. Why? The idea of countries was developed, designed, initiated, planned, by corporates, business people. There were no countries before, even in Europe. Understand this. There were no countries before. It is until certain groups of business people, decided to capture, the people there in Europe, and create geographic zones where the most dominant tribes became, the identity of those colonial geographic spaces or colonial business spaces called countries now. Hence, you see, like, there's Britain, they speak British, all of them, but investigate the history, you might be amazed. Go to France, they all speak French. Investigate the history, you might find that the French tribe conquered many other tribes, and swallowed them to create this French country or French aristocracy. I don't know what I can call it, So this is what happened then. It was not at the interest of the people of Europe. They started introducing the monetary system, the tax system, taxing everyone, taxing the poor people. Even the little that you get, they tax you, they take back. This system is parasitical, So you can tell that it was designed by psychopaths, the people who just don't care about the social being, who don't care about order of humanity, who don't care about the expansion of human consciousness, who don't care about the growth of human beings. They care only about themselves. They are egotistic, they are so greedy, they are so blind, they can't see the light of life. So this is why now all the violence, has been continuing ever since. So colonization was the exportation. They were exporting this evil system, and they did it very well using the European people they had manipulated, used. Now they'll be refusing them also, now that we're getting into the edge of expansion of artificial intelligence and the algorithms, where computerized things or machines will be taking all the responsibilities that we've been doing as human beings. So what's going to happen of humanity, whether black, white, yellow, brown, or whatever color, you are the target. But we are talking about Africa today. So in by a specific context, this conversation has been triggered by this thing that just happened few days back in China. If you were aware, or if you were informed, or if you have just made a research about, or if you just came up across or bumped in this idea of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. It happened in Beijing there in China. This is what has triggered our conversation today. So look at this scenario. This is just one president of a country outside Africa. Firstly, remember, everyone outside Africa is interested in Africa, is interested in natural resources in Africa. As we are getting into this age of technocracy, the expansion of technology, whereby technology will be used as a system of governance, as a tool of governance. It will be used to do much of the thing, to govern people, rule people, control people. All the technologies are just byproducts of natural resources. So where are the natural resources that have to sustain this expansion of technology? Much, they are here in Africa. So every other organized groups of people outside Africa have their eyes in Africa. Remember, colonization happened simply because they were eyeing Africa for natural resources. Go back to history, you will see that this is what happened. They came here, amassed the natural resources, shipped them back to Europe, America, and elsewhere. They came here to loot, they came here to enrich themselves by force without even, involving us. The creation of these things, of countries, we were not involved in these things. We were not even called into the table to discuss this idea of creating these national boundaries. Now that we even fight each other as African, based on this idea of citizenship. We were never called. We were never involved in the creation of this thing. Instead, we were raped, we were captured, we were attacked, we were destroyed, we were weakened, we were poisoned, we were bewitched by these organized groups of people in the creation of these things called countries today, as they sliced Africa amongst themselves in the Berlin Conference. If you remember the Berlin Conference, they did come together, said, we are all foreigners in that continent. We all are having one similar interest, but let us stop fighting over that continent. Those people would, wake up and come together to fight, to resist us. Let us be organized and share. This is what happened. Remember, these people had clashed several times, especially if you know about the history of our country in South Africa. Or this country, South Africa, because our country is Africa as a whole. That is our country. All these divisions, don't relate to us. These are alien mentalities and systems and institutions. Our country is just Africa, one Africa. That is it. Cut and clear. So they fought amongst themselves. Remember the Anglo-Boer War. they fought themselves. If you know about the story of Paul Kruger, as he was running away, they were being attacked by the British. The Anglo-Boer War, there was the first and then there was the second. I don't know when it ended, but there was the third one, which was sophisticated. I don't want to talk about that today, but we will talk about it some other day, because these people always come amongst us to infiltrate us, divide us, then use us, for their own interest. They can turn us against each other, fund the wars, of us against ourselves, so that we can destroy each other on their behalf. Kwa Kiswahili twasema vita vya panzi furaha ya kunguru. When the locusts fight, they'll fight until they destroy each other. They are tired, and that bird, will just come and pick them for food. Just like that. You are weak, you are tired. Most of you are now dead out of you fighting each other. That bird sees food as you are fighting, is standing there, watching, waiting for the moment when you are all done with. Then it comes, pick you up and eat you. This is what is happening of Africa to Africa and to Africa, But as we said before, nobody can come into any country, any continent, and do as they like until and unless they have an agent who facilitate the rape of that country, who facilitate, the capturing of that country by those organized groups of people. This is what we have seen, of this African continent of ours. So, yeah, the Forum on Africa-China Cooperation, this is what has triggered this conversation, So this president of China is saying, okay, calling these people like he's calling some kids, maybe some orphans or something, because coming there, they sit there, I don't know what he serves them as food, they eat, they drink wine, whoever drinks wine, they enjoy from there, they have this discussion. Already it means China, or those organized people of China, in the governance and the business that drive the government of China, they have sat down already, discussed this thing, made their deliberations, structured this thing, planned these things. Then they call these African head of state, knowing they'll come running, even if they were called in the middle of the night to say, we want you just now. African leaders will jump out of their bed and run to wherever they are called overseas, by whoever, So these are the African head of state. They are seated there in the conference room, and they are addressed by the Chinese governance, So it is the idea of this. I think is the 50 million or however much dollar investment plan, for project, and specifically, I think it's infrastructure. This is what is going to be focusing on. So these African head of states, I don't know how many of them, maybe say 50 something, are there. They were there in China. Obviously, each of them is eyeing the slice of the cake that they can bring home, not for the country. By and large, it's not for the country. Why am I saying that? Remember, the same government of China called them before in the 60 billion loan. No, the Chinese are always smart. They say, no, it's, low interest. Or initially it was the 50-50, win-win. They call it win-win situation. I wonder who wins, because we Africans always lose. So it was the 50-50 win-win situation, they said, So African head of state went there, the 60 billion, or was it the 60, however much, it was shared amongst them, to each to take back to their countries, for what? It was much about infrastructure, it was much about project, But then look at this, do these African heads of states, come to us as citizens first, inform us, to say something is happening. We were thinking of doing this. What is your take? What is your stake? What is your view, your point on that? Aren't they talking about democracy each and every day? What is democracy then? If some groups of people can just fly to China, without even telling us wherever they are going, what they are going to, But whatever they are gonna do there, the agreements they're gonna make there are gonna affect us back home here in the short or long run. So what is democracy then? Isn't this autocracy in some form? So yeah, this is what happened then in China. I think it's just few days back, maybe it was on a Thursday. So we now come to the idea of, okay, this is Africa, China, Africa cooperation. It was a forum. Now they are talking about business, about that amount of money of which each will take to their respective countries for those projects of infrastructure. When you're talking of infrastructure, we'll be talking about stuff like roads, railways, also like the what those where like in the oceans, the for shipment, such infrastructure, but when you look at it deeply, it's very much about transportation of what? Raw materials, obviously. The road network, the railway network, and the shipping, network. It's all about transportation. So if the people decide on investing on such project of such infrastructure, what are they going to be transporting? From where to where? And who's going to transporting what? So we are not forgetful, and we don't play the blind game to say we are not aware of what is happening. We have seen it happen before. Europe came here in colonization. They did the same thing. If you remember the plan by Cecil John Rhodes, Cecil John Rhodes was that guy who came here. He was a leader, or he owned the British Southern African Company. It was a colonial investment company in a way, So this is a guy, that owns lots of mines here in South Africa. If there is Rhodes, institution, or it's a Rhodes University, where they give out scholarships. Some African head of state come from there. Some African leaders, be it in business, be it politically or otherwise, they got scholarship from there, the Rhodes. That is the mind of this same Cecil John Rhodes I'm talking about. This is the same guy who colonized certain people, certain communities, destroyed certain cultures, certain tribes somewhere, and called that geographic space he had conquered Rhodesia. There was Southern Rhodesia and there was this Northern Rhodesia. So we're talking of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, was it South? I think it was Southern Rhodesia. After 1980, they decided to say, no, we're cutting that. We're creating our own name. They call that place Zimbabwe. Then the northern part, I think it was Zambia. Then there was Nyasaland. I think it's Malawi. That was all Cecil John Rhodes' property. So this guy, he says he had a dream of a Cape to Cairo railway. I remember when I was young, I came across this cartoon picture of him. His big foot, was stepping into this Southern Africa, and his hand was stretching all the way to North Africa. That was his whole picture there, trampling on Africa. This Cape to Cairo project, So this thing, when I always come across stuff like these forums of China, what African forums, every time, I come across such moments whereby African head of state make these pacts with these people. And when you check at the specificity of infrastructure, it's all about transportation. Then it reminds me of that Cecil John Rhodes dream, whereby he'll be creating a transport network to ship, to rail, to transport, natural resources here from Africa all the way to North Africa. How many countries does it go through as it goes, from Southern to Northern Africa? And mind you, there will be other railways, a line that will be joining from even the eastern side, the western side, all coming together into this one big railway line or transport line. Just like small streams and tributaries that pour water into this big river, that will eventually pour to the ocean. Take this image and see this whole idea of the Cape to Cairo, dream by Cecil John Rhodes, and also now sit down and think the deliberations, the plan, the goals, the futuristic intents of these organized people who are giving out, who are calling out African heads of state, making in such agreements, with them now, So then if it's a loan, what are the terms and conditions of those loans? Still the question comes back, did these African leaders, tell us about those forums, those meetings for those loans, for those, investment plans, So if they go there and make, yeah, sure. If they make the conditions, and the agreement with these foreign people out there, so do they tell us what they are going to do there? Do they tell us about the terms and conditions of the loans that they are agreeing upon that side? Because at the end of the day, it's our citizens who will have to pay for those loans. Paying for something that you never bought, paying for something that you never agreed upon, paying for something that you don't even understand about, So this is a question of democracy in Africa. Why are we calling ourselves democratic countries if this is the type of leadership that we see? A leadership whereby, African people don't have a say, don't have a voice, don't have even much of a space to fit into the creation of the direction of the country. Citizens are only called during elections. That is where you see the visibility of politicians, and even some business people. That is when you see their visibility amongst the communities. What are they doing? They're coming to molest you, to come to say, come, let us rape you again. Let us repeatedly steal from you. This is what is happening, as we see it in Africa. In some other countries in Africa, citizens don't even have to oppose the president or the ruling party. You find that a government, a country that is crippled economically, a country that is, crippled so that citizens can't afford healthcare services, they can't afford the basic needs, on a day-to-day basis. They can't afford anything, they can't even afford attention. Even when the politicians are speaking, they can't afford their attention. That's how detrimental the things has become, how bad the things are out there, So you find such government investing so much, in the national security system. I'm telling you, African people, open your eyes. Every time you see your government investing so much, in the police forces, the soldiers, the national security agencies, like the secret agents, the investigative officers, all those things, you must understand there is a reason. Why must you have so much, presence of the force when there is no war? What is the cause? What is the reason? This is the game of psychology now. Is it intimidation? So in some instances, these people, they go all the way to plant even their secret agents. You find you're in a tavern, there is a secret agent there. He's just listening to your conversation. Just to know what are the people saying about the ruling party. Is there anyone who's opposing the president or the government or the ruling party? Is there anyone who's bad mouthing the government? If they identify you, the next thing you'll disappear. Your family will never see you again. Maybe next thing they'll find your body, your dead body. In some instances, you'll disappear and come back with bruises, fractured bones. These guys have done something unto you. This is what is happening out there in Africa. Why? This is the leadership that we see by and large here in Africa, where we have people who believe they own the citizen. The citizens are the property of the state. We have people who have that mentality, to the extent that you even question yourself, okay, what kind of these people are these soldiers and police, who agree to commands to go out there and shoot innocent people, kill innocent citizens, fellow citizens. The people, some of the instances you'll be surprised. These guys, you live with them, you grew up with them, you've been friends with them. Some of them, you were their support systems in your growing up. when you maybe you were still at school there, you were their support system, but now they are in the national security forces. They are now the gods. Or some demigods, they take commands to come and open live fire unto, innocent, defenseless people. This is what we have seen happening around Africa time and time and time again. To the extent that we even ask yourself, what was the idea of the Organization of African Unity after all? What was the idea? What is the idea of this African Union after all? Because we don't see any unity, the unity between the government of any country and the citizens. There is a line between, we have politicians there and the citizens over this side. There's a big river there that is hard to cross. So what is the idea of unity when even African countries themselves, we don't have a sense of togetherness, a sense of order, a sense of harmony, a sense of synchronicity in terms of our relations with each other? We don't have that. Instead, it's all wars. See what's happening in DRC. When you look into the situation in DRC, the unending war in some parts of DRC, you will find that there are other neighboring African countries, that are involved in those wars, not in the escaping of the war. They are involved in the perpetuation of the situation. Whose interest are these soldiers guarding there? Whose interest are these soldiers, all these other people, out from outside DRC, what are they doing there? Even other countries far from DRC, if we really investigated the issue in DRC, we'll be amazed to find that now that you see the people, our brothers and sisters, from DRC, they have to always flee from certain regions of their homeland. They have to flee from there. They find out in other provinces, some in other countries far away from home, so that even some of them will never go back home. They will die wherever they find themselves, in this moment of time, all around the world, all around Africa, but we have African Union. A unity of who? A unity of what? So yeah, man, we really have to investigate a lot of these things, so that we make sense out of our situation. But yeah, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, this is what we're talking about, So yeah, man, they just went to China. I didn't even know until I came across, the article, thanks to Bongza Deluxe. Yeah, man, Bongza Deluxe, shout out to you wherever you are. He's the one that showed me this, because we always talk about, stuff related to what we're talking about. We care about Africa. We care about the world. We care about the wellness of African people. We care about the destiny of the world, whereby now we're just not talking about us Africans only, because we are living in a plurality, of identities, So we care about everybody, because whatever happens in one spot spills over, if it's not contained, into other spots. Whatever happens in one region spills into another region. Whatever happened to one people spills into other people. This is how life is. So it is for us all human beings, to come together, have a conversation, find ways, to solve all these puzzles, that we find ourselves, caught up in, help each other to break free from the chains, when I was talking of breaking free from the chains, if you go back to my channel, some podcasts, there is a presentation on breaking free from chains, chains of whatever form, So yeah, we have to come together to break free from chains, then build ourselves, remember the principles that cement relations, human relations, remind ourselves of the values that cement human relations, this is our call, this is our responsibility. So yeah, this is what we always talk about, with many other people, But in this sense, we're talking about this thing in this morning until Bonza Deluxe showed me this article. This is what triggered this conversation we're having today, So yeah, there is no democracy in Africa. This is why we see head of states, they take decisions on their own. We just always have to be told what they say. As an example, I remember there was a time when our parliamentarians, we say our, they are not ours. We don't own them. They are just in parliament. They're their own business. It's all about personal gain. But they agreed, and they were even clapping hands in the announcement of the basic wage, 3.5 rands. Just think of it. These are old people in parliament, who can't even afford 3.5, to live on 3.5 in a day. They can't afford that. But they are imposing the idea of 3.5 basic wage, nationally. This is what they say they are imposing. They were clapping hands after that announcement. Like, I felt so bad because then I was also working, I was also an employee of some company. I felt so bad because now I was like, so there is a collective interest, common interest between politicians who are in governance, and corporations in the private sector, the corporate world. There is an interest, common interest. So because government is not the biggest employer in the country, it's private companies, that are employing. So they have common interest to those in parliament. After all, those in parliament own companies. So it is fitting for them to say, okay, 3.5 is the minimum wage, the minimum wage nationally. It is fitting for them because that justifies why they'll have to, misuse, rape, and also to enslave fellow citizens, to make themselves rich. They just got into the colonial system and they didn't want to, correct the system, destroy the system, and institute a new system where that empowers every citizen, based on idea of self-determination. They didn't have an interest to that. Why? Go back and ask yourself, why are they, making decisions that are so much of interest even to the corporations? Can we read between the lines? Who are they representing? Whose agents are they? But this is what is happening in Africa. You check. So we just have to talk about these things. Don't be scared to express your views. Don't be scared to live your life the way you feel it, because it's no use. It's no use to pretend, to acquiesce, to just allow yourself to be, imposed upon by other people for their own interest. Because simply mean they'll use you, misuse you, and then later refuse you. You are just a biodegradable material unto them. When they are done with you, they just throw you away. Just like a chappies, when you're done, chewing the chappies, there's no more sugar. Why chew this thing? You just throw it away into the trash bin. So this is what is happening unto Africans. Hence, you find all this, uncontrollable migration here in Africa. It's simply because of the economic situations, the political environment, the government policies and systems here in Africa. They are not for Africans. They are just here in Africa, for the interest of others, who don't have any interest, for Africa. So, yeah, man. So China has always this smart mind of saying, okay, it's low interest rates, so yeah, they give out the loans, then the project is specific infrastructure, but let's investigate these things because this government won't tell us. So let's investigate. Let us all be journalistic. Each and every one of us as citizens, we have to be journalists. Investigate issues because they concern you. You are where you are simply because of the decisions taken by politicians and other people out there. That is why still Slalemi Kukwini. That is why still Umhlaba wethu Gabuni. That is why still we are the poorest. That is why we are the cheapest of labor, in the labor market. It's simply because of the ideas and the decision taken by other people out there. So we really have to be, in this point of self-determination. Kwa Kiswahili twasema kujichagulia, self-determination. We must have this idea of self-determination because your life is your life and you live it 99.9% within yourself. So if there is no peace, there is no harmony, there is no truth, there's no justice within yourself, the rest of your life, you are dead, walking zombie. This is what is happening of most of us, simply because we are scared to be journalists, to investigate, to research. Instead, we allow ourselves to get ourselves into a point whereby our attention is diverted into something else. Entertainment, psychoactives, drugs everywhere, alcohol everywhere, and this thing of alcohol and drug is so pissing off, especially in our country here. It's just so pissing off. I always look at my people, my relatives all around the country, and like, we are being put in a position whereby we destroy ourselves. They give us tools, weapons to destroy ourselves. What is this thing of alcohol doing to us, African people? Look at family breakages, family and domestic violence. Look at the accident. Look at the people being fired from their jobs. It's all related to what? Psychoactives, alcohol and drugs. People drop out from school. People drop out from colleges. People drop out from work simply because of these things. But we don't make these things. We don't control these things. But they are flooded into our communities systematically. When I always talk about these things, I always remind, of my people of something that happened to China some years way back there. Britain once, aimed drugs, at China to destroy China with drugs. I don't know, it was for how many years. The economy of China just crippled. I'm talking of China that was ruled by emperors then. The economy was crippled. People just poverty gets so high so that there was no way of making, a means, no way of making money, So even people find themselves seeing an opportunity in this drug thing. So by and large, many people started getting into this drug thing. Even the people in the, offices of leadership up there, they got into the syndicate of drugs. So drugs were shipped from somewhere, getting into China, destroying Chinese people. They were sleeping in the street. If you are in any town or township, here in South Africa, you'll understand what I'm talking about. When you see the streets are flooded with this, and it's mostly young people. That's so sad. They sleep in the street, they live in the streets, they ran away from their homes, So there is a lot that's happening, but it took political will by one Chinese leader to say, we are stopping this. The leader was so brave to face the consequences of facing up with these big sharks, that eat the small fish in the sea. He was so self-honest. He was so patriotic to say, I'm stopping this thing. And look at where China is today. China is now competing with Britain. So China is now competing with America, in terms of the economy, in terms of even the political sphere of influence. They are competing. Hence, we're talking about these loans, talking about these forums, China-Africa cooperation. We're talking about these deals that are being made. It's systematic. Do you think there is anyone who loves Africa? Do you think there's any government who respects Africa? Do you think there's anyone who cares about Africa? So can you think somebody can just bring, to Africa something, for cheap, for less, unless they have another agenda beyond that? So we really have to read between the lines. Never wait for the news bulletin to inform you, because some of the news are controlled after all. So be investigative. We are living in the age of, information and awareness. The universe has shifted into the position of truth, awareness, reality. So be in tune with the mind of the universe, so that everything, shall be unfolded. Everything shall be revealed unto you. You'll never allow yourself to be manipulated, however, which way, you see. So, yeah, man, we really see the interest, of other countries and even China in this thing. There is a recolonization strategy. There's going to be a second, scramble for Africa now. The first one was the European scramble, for Africa. And they did scramble, they did fight each other so bad until they came to the table, discussed how best they can scramble for Africa. They agreed on the best way to scramble, and they did continue to scramble until we find ourselves, being citizens of South Africa, Botswana, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, etc., etc. That was the result of their agreement on how to rape us. Now we still want to continue attach our identity into that enslavement, attach our value into that enslavement. Now we hate each other so much. It's so amazing that, when you just cross over here, after Free State, we are now in what is Lesotho. Before the British came and the Dutch came, this was just one area, one zone under one, a leadership. People are just separated by the mountains. We have the other family across, you go to Limpopo. There's this Limpopo River. One people, same people. One family separated by the river, but they used to cross the river, to ask for salt, to visit their neighbors until Cecil John Rhodes came and Van Riebeeck came. Then they put this demarcation to say, no, you are no longer related to your neighbor there, your relative across. There is a nationality thing, a new thing. You have to agree to that. We find ourselves in this situation now. We fight each other so well. We destroy each other so bad. We will even ban each other. So what is happening here in South Africa is bound to happen into another country again, some other time. Remember, these people have an agenda on us. We don't have an agenda. We don't even have a 1-year plan. We don't even have a 5-year plan. We don't even have a 60-year plan, a 100-year plan. When Van Riebeeck came here, their plan was timeless. When Cecil John Rhodes arrived here, their plan was timeless. So from generation to generation, they'll make sure that each generation has a specific responsibility and duty to fulfill the dream that was agreed upon, long back way there. That is how they do. That is why you find these people have this thing called generational wealth. It says out of the system they created, for us to create that, it will take us to structure our mind, rewire our information body, revise our mind and souls, deschool and unlearn ourselves to start afresh, have a new identity, whereby we have an African identity that is defined by us and for us, nobody else. Whereby we now have to define what Africa is, and define how best can we survive in Africa and all over the world. As African people, how best can we have access and benefit from anything that the land in Africa has to offer? How best can we now come up with a system whereby we have, authority over the resources, in Africa? How best can we develop ourselves in terms of creating a system in governance where each citizen have a space to bring themselves, their talent, their skills, their intelligence, their callings and life purposes of the lifetime, to improve, and, contribute towards the development of Africa by Africans, for Africans. Until we come to that point, we will know anything. Instead, what's happening here in South Africa, power will shift. They go to another country. We find all Africans again, they run away from the country, they go to that country. Wars begin now, hatred become, these people shift the power to another a space again. We find ourselves running away again. This is what's going to be the pattern, diversions of attention. They fund these things, our separatedness, our hatred against each other, our self-ignorance individually and, collectively as a group of people is funded. There's lots of money that is invested there, because we mustn't come to a point whereby, we understand ourselves. We have a mind of looking into ourselves. We have a mind, of getting into ourselves. We mustn't get to that point. That is their agenda. That is the Africa that we're talking about today. That is the leadership in Africa. It's not the African leadership, I'm sorry. It's the leadership in Africa, that is getting us into this. We have people that willingly accept the positions of being agents and custodians of the colonial agenda, be it the previous colonial agenda or the new yet to come colonial agenda. They are willing agents, of this whole thing. So don't be amazed when you see the whole of Africa now is full of Chinese people, I'm not for the hatred of anyone. I'm not anti anybody. I'm pro human. So I don't care what skin color you are, but as long as we vibe in the consciousness of goodness, truth, and justice, we vibe together. But yeah, this is the truth, potential reality that will unfold as time goes by. You know, all over Africa, Chinese, then from there, there'll be something else. We find ourselves, there's a Chinese governor in another country, a Chinese minister in another country, a Chinese president in another country, and the other country, and the other country. These things are possible. It's quite possible. Go back to history and look at North Africa and tell me what you see. You can't see black in Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco. Do you see any black there? That is why one of, I don't know which one, that won some cup there. I don't know, was it a football or whatever, so representing Africa. They were like, no, we are not Africans. They said that, So what is it that you see, the region in North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, etc., that you see, populated by these people that you see today? That was the land of Bantu, the land of Ntu, the land of African people. We now use this word African, just for terms of relativity to make you understand what you're talking about, but we are not Africans. We are, we can be referred to in another term, but we are not on that for today, So it was full of us, but something happened. The people that built all those pyramids that you see there are no longer there. You can't find them. Maybe me and you, we go to Egypt, as, tourists today. What if you were there in Egypt? You were one of the people that were building the pyramids. What if? You see, because you have to check the history of the Exodus. We've been migrating from point to point, ever since. But there was a point where we found ourselves driven away from North Africa. When we find ourselves destroyed there, then we have to come, down to another region. Another region, So we have to investigate all this history and find out, how did we come to this point? You see, so it's all related, just like Europe. Europe was, as we said already, populated by African people. But look at what Europe is today, you see. So yeah, man, these are the things that we really need to investigate and talk about, instead of us talking about soccer, we're talking about, our drinking spree, we're talking about our, promiscuity, we're talking about our criminal mentality, we're talking about, hatred against each other. Where is this thing getting us? Let's start talking, having a conversation, constructive conversation about things that relate to our future. As we're talking about leadership that is there in Africa today, compromising and crippling the futuristic leadership in Africa, we have to talk about these things. The decision that these old people, I don't know how many young people you can see in any African parliament. Maybe out of 10, it might be 2 or 1. It's old people out there making decisions for young people. Is there any sense? These people, they are coming to the end of their lifetime, but they are making, major decisions, life-defining decisions, generation decisions, that shall determine, the nature of life of the next generation. But they are old. What is happening? What's the nature of the decision that they are taking? It's not for the interest of Africa. So the youth of today, the potential leadership is crippled today. So African leadership, or African freedom to say, and independent, what an aborted child, long way back there. We really fought, for our potential freedom. But what happened? It was aborted by this kind of leadership that we see in Africa. Is the one that aborted potential African leadership. Not that there's never been African leadership. We still talk of the Patrice Lumumba. We talk of the Thomas Sankara. We talk of a whole lot many leaders, but they are always destroyed. Look at what happened to Marcus Garvey out there, Malcolm X out there. They are always destroyed. They are not just destroyed by people from outside, but people who are close, amongst us are the ones that are being used to destroy our futuristic potential, goodness, and power. So that's the leadership that we see. And as youths of today, we believe in this question unto you. What are you saying, about this thing that's happening? We're going to be leaving this question to the youths of today. How best are you participating in the creation of a new Africa, futuristic Africa? In Africa whereby African people understand who they are and they live, to affirm their relatedness, to protect and preserve each other, to harmonize their relations, to make sure that the generations to generations, are secure. Their security is ensured today. So their wealth is created today. As they come, they'll come to build upon the wealth that's been created by the outgoing generation. So the money that is taken, the loans that are made from IMF, the loans from the World Bank, the loans that are taken from China, they come to African countries. But what happens? They are now channeled to private accounts. These people go out there without our consent to make loans without our consent. When they come here, they chow the money. It gets into private accounts. In some instances, these monies are channeled into the ruling party accounts for election campaign, to make sure that the ruling party remains there by hook or crook. But who is paying for that loan of IMF, the loan of the World Bank, the loan of the Chinese bank, the bank for whatever loans that they attain? Now that we're talking about in this instance, the one that happened just a few days back in China, who's gonna pay for that? It's us citizens, of each and every country in Africa, through tax. We're paying for something that we never see. Because these people, they come and say, no, we'll be building, a railway. The next thing you'll find, the railway just was built 2 kilometers. The rest of the 100 kilometers will remain, and then China will be like, you are not able to pay the loan. Remember the collateral. Remember the terms and conditions. So let's go to the table. What is it that you need to give? You agreed to give out. This is how Africa is going to be captured by other organized groups of people from out there through these loans. If you really understand the history of Nigeria, the history of Zimbabwe, these people went out there, they were told to go for loans, when they could not pay the loans, not because they couldn't, but because of corruption. What happens? The same people that gave them loans said, no, if you want us not to go hard on you, introduce the economic structural program. In Zimbabwe, it was called ESAP, but there was a same one in Nigeria. And that policy crippled the economy, because now they found that the social welfare department, it had to be attacked. People have not had to be, denied access to welfare, because money has to be channeled to paying those loans. You see, yet we see politicians, they live large and large and large. Some of them, they take this money and they have offshore accounts. They in Dubai, they in Switzerland. You must understand these things. When your money gets to Dubai, get to the Swiss bank, it cannot be touched. Even if you are under scrutiny or under sanctions or whatever, your money is there. It cannot be touched. That's business now. So this is how Africa is, crippled. The futuristic point of Africa is crippled. So we the youth of Africa really need to come together at some point. We really need to come together. Forget about the citizenship, corruption and lie, and enslavement. Youth of Africa, wherever you are, you really need to make networks to come together to create an Africa that will be conducive for the next generation. We cannot fail on that. If you can succeed on putting politicians that are raping us, what will stop us from creating a system that will benefit us? We can't fail. We can achieve what we will. Remember, Marcus Garvey said, rise, you mighty African, you can achieve what you will. So we can achieve whatever we intend to do, but it's all about understanding, freeing our minds, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free ourselves. That's what Bob Marley used to say in his song. So these are the things that need to happen, and it is out of us, our initiatives, So, yeah, man, we're coming just to the end of this production, because yeah, the next presenter is in the house here at Mzansi FM, So yeah, whoever is watching Fire Trade YouTube channel, so make sure that you maintain the pace, because our themes are development from one theme to the other, one theme to the other, you see. So some of the things that we'll be talking in some podcasts or some presentations, were founded in the previous presentation. So make sure that you go back, check the videos, check the podcast, so that you remain relevant, to the time and space, So yeah, right now, yeah, we'll be just exiting our space. We thank everybody who's been with us, here at Mzansi FM, listening to our presentation today, So yeah, Sister Yanis is in the house. She's gonna be, bringing more fire, Here at Mzansi is all about fire. Na tunawaka moto. That's how we say it in Kiswahili, So yeah, for those who've been streaming with us here in our YouTube channel, we say big up yourself, Kwa sasa twasema kwaherini kwenu nyinyi nyote, tuonane tena siku nyingine.